They thought she was nobody, just a uniform, a pair of hands to serve champagne and clear plates. But when Sarai Bennett stood before the most feared matriarch in Italy and the billionaire heir Alessandro Romano, she didn't just pour water. She poured her heart out in a language they thought she couldn't possibly understand. In a world where money screams, silence is often the loudest weapon, until one sentence changed everything. One secret phrase, whispered over a plate of untouched pasta, didn't just save her job. It exposed a conspiracy that would shake the Romano Empire to its foundations. What happens when the invisible girl suddenly becomes the most important person in the room? The rain in Manhattan didn't just fall. It felt like it was trying to erase the city. For Sarai Bennett, watching the grey sheets of water hammer against the tinted windows of the Golden Heron, it felt personal. It was another Tuesday, another double shift, and another 12 hours of being invisible. The Golden Heron wasn't just a restaurant, it was a theatre for the 1%. Located just off Fifth Avenue, it was the kind of place where a salad cost more than Sarai's weekly rent, and the water list had its own sommelier. The walls were lined with velvet, the chandeliers were genuine crystal imported from Austria, and the staff were expected to be as silent and efficient as the air conditioning. Sarai adjusted her apron, wincing slightly. Her feet were already throbbing in the cheap black flats she'd bought at Target 3 months ago. She checked her reflection in the polished brass of the espresso machine. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a severe bun, her makeup minimal, her expression neutral. "Bennett!" The bark came from the kitchen door. It was Mr. Sterling, the general manager. Sterling was a man who wore suits that were too tight and cologne that was too strong. Savage by Dior, applied with a heavy hand. He looked at Sarai as if she were a smudge on his otherwise pristine floor. "Yes, Mr. Sterling?" Sarai asked, keeping her voice steady. "Table 4 is reserved for the Romano party tonight," Sterling said, wiping a bead of sweat from his forehead with a silk handkerchief. "Do you know who that is?" Sarai shook her head. She knew names like Chase, Morgan, and Rockefeller, the regulars. She didn't know Romano. "Alessandro Romano," Sterling hissed, leaning in closer. "The CEO of Romano Motors. He's in New York to close the merger with Vestra Tech. He is dining with his mother, Signora Isabella Romano, and his fiancée, Miss Tiffany St. Clair. This is a $5,000 tip table, Bennett. Do not mess this up. If I see a single water glass below the halfway mark, you're out. If the bread isn't at exactly 90 degrees, you're out. Do you understand?" "I understand, sir," Sarai said. "Good. Tiffany St. Clair personally requested the private alcove. She's particular. Just keep your head down and your mouth shut." Sarai nodded and turned back to the floor. She knew the type. She had been working high-end hospitality for 4 years, ever since her father's medical bills had decimated her college fund. She was supposed to be finishing her master's degree in linguistics at NYU. Instead, she was memorizing the ingredients of a truffle reduction and dodging the wandering hands of drunken stockbrokers. She walked over to table 4, checking the setting for the 10th time. The cutlery was silver, heavy and cold. The napkins were folded into perfect swans. It was a stage set for people who had everything, prepared by a woman who had almost nothing. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a violation of company policy. She ignored it, but she knew who it was. The landlord. She was 3 days late on rent. Again. The heavy oak doors of the restaurant swung open, and the atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. It was a change in pressure, a sudden vacuum of attention. Alessandro Romano walked in first. He was taller than he looked in the few magazine photos Sarai had seen in the break room. He wore a charcoal 3-piece suit that fit his broad shoulders like armor. He had dark hair, slightly messy in a calculated way, and eyes that scanned the room with a predator's intelligence. He wasn't handsome in the cute boy-next-door way. He was striking, intense, and terrifyingly composed. On his arm was Tiffany St. Clair. Sarai recognized her immediately from social media. She was an influencer-turned-socialite, wearing a red dress that cost more than a Honda Civic. She was smiling, but her eyes were darting around the room, checking to see who was watching her. Trailing behind them, looking small and fragile in a heavy black coat, was an older woman. Signora Isabella Romano. She leaned heavily on a cane, her face etched with lines of exhaustion. Unlike Tiffany, she wasn't looking for an audience. She looked like she just wanted to be home. "Right this way, Mr. Romano," Sterling said, his voice dripping with sycophancy. He practically bowed as he led them to table 4. Sarai stood by the station, holding the pitcher of ice water, waiting for the signal. She watched as Alessandro pulled the chair out for his mother first, ignoring Tiffany for a split second. Tiffany's smile faltered, a tiny crack in the porcelain, before she recovered and sat down, smoothing her dress. "This place is acceptable," Tiffany said, her voice carrying across the quiet room. "Though the lighting is a bit dim for photos, Alessandro. You know I need to post about the engagement dinner." "We are here to eat, Tiffany, not to broadcast," Alessandro said. His voice was deep, accented, but clear. He sounded tired. "And to make sure Mama is comfortable after the flight." He turned to his mother. "All right, Mama?" he asked in English. The old woman nodded vaguely, staring at the menu as if it were written in alien hieroglyphs. She looked overwhelmed. Sterling snapped his fingers at Sarai. That was the cue. Sarai took a deep breath, plastered on her professional mask, and walked toward the lion's den. "Sparkling or still?" Sarai asked, her voice soft and polite. Tiffany didn't even look up from her phone. "Sparkling. San Pellegrino only. And make sure it's chilled to 40 degrees. Last time I was here, it was lukewarm." "Of course, Ma'am," Sarai said. She poured the water for Tiffany, then Alessandro. When she reached the older woman, Signora Romano looked up. Her eyes were dark and watery, filled with a confusion that broke Sarai's heart. The woman touched the menu with a trembling hand. "Water?" Sarai asked gently. The woman didn't respond. She looked at Alessandro and murmured something in Italian, her voice low and rapid. "Alessandro, non capisco niente qui. Voglio solo andare a casa." "Alessandro, I don't understand anything here. I just want to go home." Alessandro sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Mamma, per favor. We just got here. Try to eat something. The doctors said you need strength." "Ugh, are we doing the Italian thing all night?" Tiffany groaned, dropping her phone onto the tablecloth. "Alessandro, you promised this would be a special night. For us. It's rude to speak a language the rest of the table doesn't understand." "She is my mother, Tiffany," Alessandro said, his jaw tightening. "And she barely speaks English. You know this." "Well, she could try," Tiffany snapped, picking up her menu. "It's not that hard. Menu, pasta, wine. See? Easy." Sarai felt a flash of anger rise in her chest. She gripped the water pitcher tighter. She knew what it was like to be in a place where you didn't understand the rules, where people looked down on you for things you couldn't control. Her own grandmother had been German, and Sarai remembered how people used to mock her accent at the grocery store. That was why Sarai had studied languages, to bridge gaps, to stop people from feeling small. "I'll have the lobster thermidor," Tiffany announced loudly, "and bring a bottle of the Chateau Margaux 2015, and for her." She gestured dismissively at Alessandro's mother. Just bring her some spaghetti or something. She looks like a spaghetti person." Alessandro looked like he was about to explode. "Tiffany, stop it!" "What? I'm helping!" Tiffany laughed, a shrill sound. "She can't read the menu, babe. I'm just expediting the process." The older woman shrank back into her chair, sensing the hostility, even if she didn't understand the words. She looked down at her empty plate, her hands clutching a rosary she had pulled from her purse. Mr. Sterling was hovering nearby, watching Sarai like a hawk. Sarai knew she should just write down spaghetti and walk away. It was the safe thing to do. It was the job. But then she looked at Signora Romano's face. The woman looked terrified. She looked lonely. Sarai stepped forward. She didn't look at Tiffany. She didn't look at Alessandro. She looked directly at the older woman. "Excuse me," Sarai said. Tiffany rolled her eyes. "We ordered." "Go away." Sarai ignored her. She took a small step closer to the mother and lowered her voice. "Buonasera, signora," Sarai said softly. The Italian rolled off her tongue effortlessly, shaped by years of late-night study and hours listening to tapes in the university lab. "Il menù può essere confuso. Se vuole, posso suggerirle qualcosa di leggero?" "Good evening, madam. The menu can be confusing. If you like, can I suggest something light?" The reaction was instantaneous. Signora Romano's head snapped up. Her eyes went wide. For a second, she looked as if she had seen a ghost. Then, a slow, beautiful smile spread across her face, the first time she had smiled all night. "Tu parli italiano?" "You speak Italian?" The old woman gasped, clutching her chest. "Solo un po', signora. Ho studiato all'università," Sarai replied with a humble smile. "Lo chef prepara un ottimo risotto allo zafferano. È molto simile a quello che fanno a Milano. È caldo e confortante." "Only a little, madam. I studied at university. The chef makes an excellent saffron risotto. It is very similar to what they make in Milan. It is warm and comforting." The old woman's eyes filled with tears. She reached out and grabbed Sarai's hand, a massive breach of protocol that would have given Mr. Sterling a heart attack if he could hear the conversation. "Si, cara. Si, per favore." "Risotto," the mother whispered. "Grazie. Grazie mille." Sarai gently squeezed the woman's hand and pulled back. "Sarà un onore," she said. The table had gone deadly silent. Sarai straightened up and turned to write down the order. When she looked up, she found Alessandro staring at her. He wasn't looking at her like a waitress anymore. He was looking at her like he was seeing her for the very first time. His mouth was slightly open, his dark eyes intense and probing. "You speak Italian," Alessandro said. It wasn't a question. "I do, sir," Sarai said, keeping her eyes lowered professionally. "I thought it might help your mother feel more comfortable." "That was—" Alessandro started, but he was cut off. "That was incredibly rude," Tiffany shrieked. Heads at nearby tables turned. "You little sneak! You were talking about me, weren't you? Speaking in code with the old lady so you could make fun of me." "I assure you, Mom, we were only discussing the risotto," Sarai said calmly. "Don't lie to me. I saw you smirking." Tiffany stood up, her face flushing red. She grabbed her glass of San Pellegrino. "You think you're smart? You think because you know a few foreign words you're better than me?" "Tiffany, sit down," Alessandro commanded, his voice low and dangerous. "No, I want her fired," Tiffany yelled. She looked around wildly for the manager. "Sterling, get over here." Mr. Sterling materialized instantly, looking panicked. "Miss St. Clair, is there a problem?" "This girl," Tiffany pointed a manicured finger at Sarai, "just insulted me in Italian. She was conspiring with his mother to humiliate me. I want her gone. Now." Sterling's face went pale. He turned to Sarai, his eyes bulging with rage. He didn't ask for her side of the story. He didn't ask what happened. He just saw a billionaire's fiancée upset and a waitress who was expendable. "Bennett," Sterling growled. "Kitchen, now." "But sir, I said kitchen," Sterling barked. "Get your things. You're done here." Sarai felt the blood drain from her face. Her rent, her debt, her father's medication. It all flashed before her eyes. She looked at Alessandro, hoping he would say something, hoping the man who had looked at her with such intensity just seconds ago would defend her. But Alessandro remained seated. He was looking at his mother, who was now weeping silently into her napkin. He looked torn, frozen by the public spectacle Tiffany was creating. Sarai's heart hardened. Of course, she thought, he's just like the rest of them, rich, spineless, and indifferent. She set the notepad down on the table with a trembling hand. "I'll put the order in for the risotto before I go," Sarai said quietly to Alessandro. "Your mother needs to eat." She turned and walked toward the kitchen, her head held high, while Tiffany's triumphant smirk burned a hole in her back. She didn't see Alessandro stand up abruptly as the kitchen doors swung shut behind her. The kitchen of the Golden Heron was a violent contrast to the dining room. Where the front of the house was velvet and whispers, the back was stainless steel, steam and shouting. The air smelled of seared steak, truffle oil, and dish soap. Sarai walked past the line cooks, her face burning. She refused to let the tears fall. Not here. Not in front of the sous chef who always tried to grab her waist, or the dishwasher who barely spoke English but stared with pitying eyes. She reached the small, grimy locker room at the back and started untying her apron. Her hands were shaking so badly she couldn't undo the knot. "Leave it," a voice sneered from the doorway. It was Sterling. He had followed her in, smelling of expensive cologne and cheap cruelty. "You embarrassed me, Bennett," Sterling said, stepping into the cramped room. He closed the door, blocking the noise of the kitchen. "Do you have any idea how much effort I put into securing the Romano reservation? And you blow it by chatting up the mother?" "I was doing my job," Sarai said, her voice trembling but defiant. She finally yanked the knot loose and threw the apron on the bench. The woman was terrified. She didn't understand anything. I just wanted her to eat. "You aren't paid to care," Sterling spat. "You are paid to serve. Tiffany St. Clair is the future Mrs. Romano. If she says you insulted her, then you insulted her. I don't care about the truth. I care about the bill." "Then you're a coward," Sarai said. The words were out before she could stop them. Sterling's eyes narrowed. He took a threatening step forward. "What did you call me?" "I said you're a coward. You know she was lying." "Get out," Sterling hissed, "and don't expect a reference. You're blacklisted, Bennett. I know every manager in this city. You won't pour coffee at a diner when I'm done with you." Sarai grabbed her coat, a thin, worn trench coat that wasn't warm enough for the storm outside. She clutched her purse, feeling the vibration of her phone again. The landlord. She reached for the door handle, but before she could turn it, the door was flung open from the outside with such force that it slammed against the metal lockers. Sterling jumped back, startled. Alessandro Romano stood in the doorway. He looked wildly out of place. His Italian wool suit, his polished Oxfords, his imposing height. He looked like a king who had wandered into a scullery. But his expression wasn't regal. It was furious. Behind him, the entire kitchen staff had stopped working. The executive chef was watching with his mouth open, a ladle dripping sauce onto the floor. "Mr. Romano!" Sterling's voice jumped an octave. He smoothed his jacket, his face shifting instantly from bully to servant. "I apologize for the disturbance. I was just handling the personnel issue. This girl is leaving immediately." "Get out of my way," Alessandro said. His voice was quiet, but it carried a weight that made Sterling shrink against the lockers. Alessandro stepped past the manager and looked at Sarai. He saw the red rim of her eyes, the cheap coat, the way she was clutching her purse like a shield. "Did you really say those things about Tiffany?" Alessandro asked. He looked directly into her eyes, searching for something. Sarai straightened her spine. She had nothing left to lose. "No. I told your mother that the saffron risotto was like the one in Milan. That's all." Alessandro held her gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded. "I believe you." He turned to Sterling. "You fired her?" "Well, yes, Mr. Romano," Sterling stammered. "Miss St. Clair was very upset, and our policy is—" "Your policy is to humiliate a woman who showed kindness to my mother?" Alessandro cut him off. "My mother has not eaten a full meal in 3 days. Since my father died last month, she has been fading away. Tonight, because of this woman, she smiled. She asked for food, and you fired her for it." Sterling opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Alessandro turned back to Sarai. "Please, come back to the table. I will explain to Tiffany. You will finish the service, and I will make sure you are tipped generously. $5,000. Cash." The room went silent. The dishwasher dropped a plate. $5,000. It was more than Sarai made in 2 months. It would pay the rent. It would buy her father's heart medication. It would buy her groceries. All she had to do was walk back out there, serve the woman who had lied about her, and swallow her pride. Sarai looked at the money in her mind. Then she looked at Alessandro. He was trying to fix it, yes, but he was trying to fix it with money. He wanted to buy her compliance so his dinner could go smoothly. "No," Sarai said. Alessandro blinked, surprised. "Excuse me?" "I said no," Sarai repeated, her voice gaining strength. "I won't come back, not to be sneered at by your fiancé, not to work for a manager who treats me like garbage. My dignity is worth more than your tip." She saw a flash of shock in Alessandro's eyes. He wasn't used to being told no, especially not by people in wet trench coats. "I appreciate that you came back here." Sarai softened her tone slightly. "And I hope your mother enjoys the risotto. Truly. But I'm done." She pushed past Alessandro, stepping out of the locker room and into the kitchen. The line cooks parted for her like the Red Sea. She walked through the swinging doors, not the ones leading to the dining room, but the ones leading to the back alley. "Wait!" Alessandro called out. Sarai didn't stop. She pushed open the heavy metal exit door and stepped out into the pouring rain. The cold wind hit her like a slap, soaking her hair instantly. She walked fast, her shoes splashing in the puddles, disappearing into the dark, wet labyrinth of New York City. Back in the kitchen, Alessandro stood frozen. He looked at the empty doorway, then at the cowering Sterling. "You," Alessandro pointed a finger at the manager. "If that risotto isn't perfect, I will buy this building just to fire you myself." He turned on his heel and stormed out, leaving Sterling shaking in his expensive tight suit. The next morning, the sun did not shine on Sarai Bennett. The rain had stopped, leaving the city grey and grim, matching her mood perfectly. She sat at the small chipped formica table in her studio apartment in Queens. The apartment was the size of a walk-in closet in Alessandro Romano's world. The wallpaper was peeling in the corner, and the radiator hissed and clanked but produced no heat. On the table sat 3 things: a cup of instant coffee, a bottle of pills with her father's name, David Bennett on the label, and an eviction notice. Notice to quit. 72 hours. Sarai rubbed her temples. Her father was staying at a subsidized care facility across town, a place that smelled of bleach and despair, because she couldn't afford a private nurse to keep him at home. He had early-onset dementia and a heart condition. The facility costs were eating her alive, and now, Without the golden heron, she couldn't even pay her own rent. Okay, Sarai. Think, she whispered to herself. She had her degree in linguistics, but without the master's finished, the high-paying translation jobs were out of reach. She could try tutoring, but that took weeks to set up. She needed money today. Her phone rang. She jumped, hoping it wasn't the landlord. It was an unknown number. "Hello?" she answered hesitantly. "Ms. Sarai Bennett?" A man's voice. Professional. Crisp. "Yes." "My name is Arthur Higgins. I am the personal assistant to Mr. Alessandro Romano. I am standing outside your building." Sarai's heart stopped. She ran to the window and looked down 3 stories. Sure enough, parked illegally in front of the rundown bodega downstairs was a sleek, black Cadillac Escalade. A driver in a suit was standing by the door. "How did you find me?" Sarai asked, a chill running down her spine. "Mr. Romano can be very resourceful," Higgins said. "He would like to speak with you. He has a proposition." "I told him last night I don't want his money," Sarai said, gripping the phone tight. "This isn't charity, Miss Bennett. It is a job offer, a very specific one. And considering your current situation with your landlord, Mr. Henderson, I believe, Mr. Romano thought you might be interested in a solution." Sarai felt violated. They knew about the landlord. In less than 12 hours they had dug into her life. "I'm not coming down," she said. "Mr. Romano is not in the car," Higgins clarified. "He is at the Plaza Hotel with his mother. I am here to transport you. If you come with me, Mr. Romano has authorized me to give you a check for $5,000 immediately, just for attending the meeting, regardless of whether you take the job." Sarai looked at the eviction notice on the table. Then she looked at her father's pills. $5,000 just to listen. It would buy her a month of safety. She hated herself for it, but she didn't have a choice. "Give me 5 minutes," she said. 30 minutes later, Sarai was sitting in the penthouse suite of the Plaza Hotel. The room was larger than her entire apartment building. It had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, white leather furniture, and a grand piano that looked like it had never been played. Arthur Higgins had been true to his word. He had handed her a cashier's check the moment she stepped into the car. It was in her purse now, burning a hole in the fabric. The double doors opened, and Alessandro walked in. He looked different today. He wasn't wearing the armor of a 3-piece suit. He wore dark jeans and a black cashmere sweater. He looked younger, but also more tired. There were dark circles under his eyes. "Thank you for coming," he said. He didn't offer a handshake. He kept a respectful distance. "Your assistant said you investigated me," Sarai said, cutting to the chase. "That's illegal, isn't it?" "It's thorough," Alessandro corrected. He walked over to a side table and picked up a manila folder. "Sarai Bennett, 26 years old, BA in linguistics from NYU, magna cum laude. Dropped out of the master's program 2 years ago due to financial hardship. Father, David, suffered a stroke followed by complications. You work, or worked, 60 hours a week to keep him in the Green Lawn Care Facility." Sarai felt naked. He had her entire life summarized in a few sentences. "What do you want, Mr. Romano? You want to pay me off to keep quiet about Tiffany." Alessandro let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Tiffany left for Paris this morning. She was displeased that I didn't fire the manager. We are currently taking space." He tossed the folder onto the coffee table. "I don't care about Tiffany right now," Alessandro said, his voice dropping. "I care about my mother." He gestured toward a closed door on the other side of the suite. "She refused to speak to anyone this morning. She refused to eat breakfast. She kept asking for the girl with the kind voice. She called you L'Angelo, the angel." Alessandro looked at Sarai, and for the first time she saw desperation in his eyes. "My mother is dying, Sarai. Not physically. Her heart is strong enough. But her spirit. She is grieving my father. She is in a foreign country, and she feels isolated. She hates the nurses I hired. She hates the doctors. She only responded to you." "So, what? You want me to serve her lunch?" Sarai asked. "I want to hire you," Alessandro said. "Not as a waitress, as her personal companion. You speak the language. You understand the culture. I want you to stay with us for the duration of our trip in New York, 3 months. You will translate for her, accompany her to appointments, and just be with her." "I'm not a nurse," Sarai said. "She doesn't need a nurse. She needs a friend she can understand." Alessandro took a step closer. "I will pay you $10,000 a month, plus room and board here at the plaza, and I will cover the cost of a private nurse for your father at his facility, so you don't have to worry about him while you are here." Sarai's breath hitched. 10,000 a month. Private care for her dad. It was a lifeline. It was a miracle. But she remembered Tiffany. She remembered the way Sterling had treated her. She remembered that people like Alessandro Romano usually had a catch. "Why?" she asked. "There are 1,000 Italian translators in New York. Why me?" Alessandro looked at the closed door, then back at her. His gaze was intense. "Because yesterday, when Tiffany insulted you, you didn't defend yourself. You defended my mother. You prioritized her comfort over your own job. Loyalty like that, it cannot be bought. It has to be found." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a keycard. "The job is yours if you want it. But there is one condition." Sarai stiffened. "What condition?" "You report only to me," Alessandro said darkly. "Not to my business partners, not to the press, and certainly not to Tiffany if she returns. My mother, she knows things about the family business, things that people would pay to hear. I need someone I can trust to keep her secrets." Sarai looked at the keycard. She thought of her dad, sitting alone in the rec room at Greenlawn. "I'll do it," Sarai said. "Good," Alessandro said. He looked relieved, his shoulders dropping an inch. "She's in the bedroom. She's waiting for you." Sarai took the keycard. She felt like she was signing a contract with the devil, or perhaps a saint. She wasn't sure which one Alessandro was yet. She walked to the bedroom door and knocked softly. "Avanti," a weak voice called out. Sarai opened the door. The room was dark, the curtains drawn. Isabella Romano was sitting in a wheelchair by the window, looking at the slice of Central Park visible through the glass. When she turned and saw Sarai, her face lit up with that same transformative smile from the restaurant. "Sei tu," Isabella whispered. "It's you." "Buongiorno, signora," Sarai said, walking in. "Ho sentito che ha bisogno di un'amica." "Good morning, madam. I heard you need a friend." Isabella reached out her hand. Sarai took it. "Attenta, bambina," Isabella whispered, pulling Sarai close so Alessandro couldn't hear from the other room. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Mio figlio, lui è in pericolo, e non lo sa." "Be careful, child. My son. He is in danger, and he doesn't know it." Sarai froze. She looked back at the open door where Alessandro was on his phone, pacing. "Danger," Sarai whispered back in Italian. "What kind of danger?" Isabella's eyes darted around the room, paranoid. "The merger. Vestratech. It is not a merger. It is an assassination." Sarai's blood ran cold. She had just accepted a job to pour tea and translate pleasantries. She hadn't signed up for corporate espionage. Before she could ask more, Alessandro walked into the room. "Is everything okay?" he asked, sensing the tension. Sarai straightened up, letting go of Isabella's hand. She looked at the old woman, who had instantly reverted to a mask of senile confusion. "Everything is fine," Sarai lied, her heart hammering against her ribs. "We were just getting reacquainted." Alessandro nodded. "Good. I have a meeting at the Vestra headquarters in an hour. I'll leave you two to get settled." He turned to leave. Sarai watched him go, then looked back at the old woman who was now staring at her with sharp, lucid eyes. Sarai realized then that the eviction notice and the spilled water were the least of her problems. She had just walked into a trap, and the only person who knew the way out was a woman everyone thought was losing her mind. 2 weeks into her employment, Sarai Bennett felt less like a companion and more like a double agent. The Plaza Hotel suite had become her world. By day, she read Italian poetry to Isabella and helped the older woman navigate the complex emotions of grief. By night, she lay awake in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, replaying Isabella's whisper. "It is an assassination." She had tried to probe Isabella for more details, but the matriarch was cunning. On days when Alessandro was present, Isabella was the picture of frailty, forgetting names, dropping spoons, staring blankly at the television. But the moment the door clicked shut, her eyes would sharpen. She would guide Sarai to specific documents in Alessandro's home office, pointing at names with a gnarled finger, then reverting to her confused state the second they heard footsteps. The tension broke on a Thursday. Arthur Higgins, the assistant who always looked like he had slept in his suit, tapped on Sarai's door. "Miss Bennett," Higgins said, holding a garment bag. "Mr. Romano requires your attendance this evening." Sarai looked up from the book she was translating. "Attendance where?" "The Vestra Tech Merger Gala. It is being held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. It is the final public event before the contract signing on Saturday." "I thought I was just here to care for his mother," Sarai said. "Signora Romano refuses to go unless you accompany her." Higgins sighed, looking exhausted. She threw a shoe at the last nurse who tried to help her dress. "Please, just put this on." He hung the bag on the door and left. Sarai unzipped the bag. Inside was a dress that made her breath catch. It was midnight blue silk, floor length, with a modest but elegant neckline. It wasn't flashy like the things Tiffany St. Clair wore. It was sophisticated, classy. When Sarai stepped out into the living area 2 hours later, the room went quiet. Alessandro was standing by the window, adjusting his cufflinks. He turned, and his hand stilled. He looked her up and down, not with the hungry gaze of the men at the Golden Heron, but with a look of genuine appreciation. "You look—" Alessandro paused, searching for the English word. "Incantevole. Enchanting." "It's a beautiful dress, Mr. Romano," Sarai said, deflecting the compliment. She felt exposed, not just physically, but emotionally. "Is your mother ready?" "She is," Alessandro said. He walked over to her, stopping a foot away. He smelled of cedar and rain. "Sarai, tonight is important. Victor Krell, the CEO of Vestra, will be there. He is difficult. My mother's presence is symbolic. It shows the Romano family is united. Just keep her calm. Keep her happy." "I will," Sarai promised. The gala was a sensory overload. The temple of Dendur was lit with blue and silver lights. A string quartet played softly in the corner, drowned out by the murmur of New York's elite. Waiters circulated with trays of champagne. Sarai felt a pang of sympathy for them, remembering how her feet used to ache on these floors. Isabella was in a wheelchair, dressed in black velvet, clutching Sarai's hand like a lifeline. "Stay close," Isabella whispered in Italian. "Listen. Listen to everything." Alessandro was immediately swallowed by a crowd of investors. Sarai pushed Isabella toward a quiet corner near an Egyptian sphinx, grabbing a glass of water for the older woman. "That is him," Isabella hissed, nodding her head slightly toward a group of men near the bar. Sarai looked. Standing in the center of the circle was Victor Krell. He was a short, thick-set man, with pale eyes and a smile that didn't reach them. He was laughing loudly, clapping Alessandro on the back as the billionaire rejoined the group. "Mr. Krell," Sarai noted. "He looks friendly." "A snake smiles before it strikes," Isabella muttered. Sarai stood dutifully by the wheelchair, playing the part of the invisible help. She watched Alessandro. He looked commanding, charming, the perfect CEO. But she saw the tension in his jaw. He was betting the entire legacy of Romano Motors on this deal. Vestra Tech's autonomous driving software was supposed to modernize the classic Italian brand. Ideally, Sarai would have just stood there. But Isabella suddenly knocked her water glass off the tray attached to her wheelchair. It shattered loudly on the stone floor. Heads turned. Krell looked over, annoyed. Alessandro looked concerned. "Oh Dio, mi dispiace," Isabella wailed, playing up the drama. "Acqua! Acqua! I'll get it," Sarai said, crouching down to pick up the shards. "Leave it," Krell's voice boomed. He walked over, his expensive shoes crunching on a piece of glass. He looked down at Isabella with thinly veiled disgust, then at Sarai. "The staff will handle it. Get her out of the way, girl." He spoke to Sarai as if she were furniture. He assumed she was just a hired nurse, likely American, likely monolingual. Alessandro stepped in. "Victor, please. My mother is fragile." "She is a distraction, Alessandro," Krell said, switching to English with a heavy accent. "But fine." Krell turned back to his associate, a tall, severe-looking man named Braun. They moved slightly away, but Sarai was still on the ground, wiping up the water with a napkin. They were only 3 feet away. And then Krell made a mistake. He assumed that in an American museum, surrounded by Americans and Italians, no one would pay attention to a rapid exchange in a different tongue. He switched to German. Sarai froze. Her grandmother was from Dusseldorf. Sarai had grown up hearing German lullabies, German scoldings, and German secrets. She hadn't spoken it in years, but she understood it perfectly. "Der Italiener ist so naiv," Krell muttered to Braun. "The Italian is so naive." "Ist das Update bereit?" Braun asked. "Is the update ready?" "Ja," Krell replied, sipping his scotch. "Samstag beim Testlauf. Sobald der Prototyp 120 km/h erreicht, schaltet sich die Lenkung ab. Es wird wie ein tragischer Unfall aussehen. Fahrerfehler. Die Aktie stürzt ab und wir kaufen den Rest der Firma für Pennies." "Yes. Saturday at the test run. As soon as the prototype reaches 120 km/h, the steering cuts out. It will look like a tragic accident. Driver error. The stock crashes, and we buy the rest of the company for pennies." Sarai's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She kept her head down, scrubbing at a spot on the floor that was already dry. It wasn't a metaphor, she realized with horror. Isabella was right. It's not a business assassination. They are going to kill him. "Hey, you!" Krell barked. Sarai looked up, terrified he had seen the recognition in her eyes. "You missed a spot," Krell sneered, pointing to a shard of glass near his shoe. Sarai forced her face into a mask of blank stupidity. "Sorry, sir." "Thank you, sir." She picked up the shard, stood up, and grabbed the handles of the wheelchair. Her hands were shaking violently. "We need to go to the ladies' room," Sarai said to Alessandro, who was watching her with concern. "Sarai, are you okay?" "You look pale," Alessandro asked, stepping closer. "Just overwhelmed," she lied. "I'll be right back." She pushed Isabella away, moving as fast as she could without running. Once they were in the safety of the marble hallway leading to the restrooms, Sarai stopped and leaned against the wall, gasping for air. "You heard them," Isabella said. It wasn't a question. "They are going to kill him," Sarai whispered, tears pricking her eyes. "On Saturday, during the test drive, they rigged the car." Isabella gripped the armrests of her chair. "You must tell him. Tonight." "He won't believe me," Sarai said. "Krell is his partner. I'm just the help." And Krell spoke in German. "It's my word against a billionaire CEO." "Then make him believe you," Isabella commanded, her eyes fierce, "or you will be attending my son's funeral next week." The ride back to the plaza was suffocatingly silent. Alessandro sat opposite Sarai and his mother in the limousine, scrolling through emails on his phone. He looked exhausted, but content. The gala had been a success in his eyes. The press had taken photos. The stock was up. Sarai sat with her hands clasped tight in her lap. She watched the city lights blur past. The world outside was moving so fast, but inside the car, time felt suspended. Every time she looked at Alessandro, she saw Krell's sneering face. She imagined the car hitting the barrier at 120 kilometers per hour. She imagined the fire. When they arrived at the suite, the night nurse was waiting to take Isabella to bed. "Good night, Mama," Alessandro said, kissing her forehead. Isabella grabbed his hand. "Ascolta, Sarai," she whispered urgently. "Ascolta il suo cuore." Listen to Sarai. Listen to her heart. Alessandro smiled sadly, thinking his mother was speaking in metaphors again. "I will, Mama. Good night." As the nurse wheeled Isabella away, Alessandro loosened his tie and walked toward the wet bar. "Would you like a drink, Sarai? You look like you need one." "I need to talk to you," Sarai said. Her voice was steady, hardened by the adrenaline coursing through her. Alessandro poured 2 glasses of scotch. He turned, holding one out to her. The room was dim, lit only by the city glow from the windows. The intimacy was palpable. "You seemed upset tonight," Alessandro said softly. "Was it Krell? He is a brute. I apologize for how he treated you." "It's not about how he treated me," Sarai said, ignoring the drink. "Alessandro, you need to call off the test drive on Saturday." Alessandro paused, the glass halfway to his mouth. He frowned. "What?" "The test drive, the prototype demonstration. You can't do it." "Sarai, that test drive is the cornerstone of the merger. The press will be there. Investors. If I don't drive that car, the deal collapses." He took a sip, watching her curiously. "Why are you saying this? Did my mother say something?" "No, I heard something," Sarai said. She took a step closer. "When I dropped the glass." Krell and Braun, they switched to German. They didn't think anyone could understand them. Alessandro set the glass down. His expression shifted from curiosity to skepticism. "You speak German?" "My grandmother was German. I'm fluent." Sarai took a deep breath. Krell said, "As soon as the prototype reaches 120, the steering cuts out." He said it will look like driver error. He said they want the stock to crash so they can buy your company for pennies. The silence that followed was heavy. Alessandro stared at her, his face unreadable. He looked at the window, then back at her. "Sarai," he began, his voice condescendingly calm. "Victor Krell is a shark, yes. But he is a businessman. Killing me? Destroying the prototype? That makes no sense. Vestra needs this merger as much as I do." "He doesn't want a merger," Sarai pleaded. "He wants a takeover, a hostile one. Please, you have to believe me." Alessandro ran a hand through his hair. He walked over to her, invading her personal space. He reached out, and gently touched her arm. The heat of his hand made her skin tingle. "I think," Alessandro said quietly, "that you have been spending too much time with my mother. Her paranoia, it is contagious. She sees enemies in every shadow since my father died. Now you are seeing them too." "I'm not paranoid," Sarai pulled away, frustrated. "I'm a linguist. I know what I heard. Der Italiener ist so naive. That's what he called you, the naive Italian." Alessandro flinched. The insult landed, but before he could respond, the elevator chimed. The doors to the penthouse slid open. "Alessandro, darling." A voice, sweet as poisoned honey, drifted into the room. Sarai froze. She knew that voice. Tiffany St. Clair walked in. She was wearing a white trench coat and carrying a designer weekender bag. She looked impeccable, tearful, and staged. "Tiffany!" Alessandro looked shocked. "What are you doing here? You're supposed to be in Paris." "I couldn't stay away," Tiffany sobbed, rushing forward and throwing her arms around Alessandro's neck. She buried her face in his chest. "I was so horrible to you. I realized I was just stressed about the wedding. I love you, Alessandro. I want to support you. I came back for the big day on Saturday." Alessandro stood stiffly for a moment. Then his arm slowly came up to embrace her. He looked at Sarai over Tiffany's shoulder. His eyes were conflicted. Sarai felt a sick feeling in her stomach. Tiffany's timing was too perfect. Tiffany pulled back, wiping a perfect tear from her cheek. She turned and saw Sarai. Her eyes narrowed into slits, though her mouth kept smiling. "Oh, you're still here," Tiffany said. "The waitress." "She is my mother's companion," Alessandro said, stepping back from Tiffany. "Sarai, perhaps we can finish our conversation tomorrow." It was a dismissal. He was choosing the comfort of his fiancée over the raving warnings of the hired help. Sarai looked at him, realizing that logic wouldn't work. Not now. Not with Tiffany draped on him like a cheap suit. "Good night, Mr. Romano," Sarai said coldly. "Good night, Miss St. Clair." She turned and walked to her room, locking the door behind her. She didn't sleep. Instead, she sat on the floor with her laptop, hacking into the only thing she could access, the public records of Vestra Tech. It was 3:00 a.m. when she found it. It wasn't much, just a photo from a tech conference in Berlin 3 years ago. It was a group shot of Vestra executives. In the background, holding a glass of wine and laughing at something Victor Krell was saying, was a woman. She was younger, her hair was brown instead of blonde, and she was wearing glasses. But the nose was the same. The chin was the same. It was Tiffany. Sarai zoomed in. The name tag on the woman's dress didn't say Tiffany St. Clair. It said Tiffany Braun. Braun, the name of Krell's associate at the party. Sarai clapped a hand over her mouth. Tiffany wasn't just an influencer. She was related to the executioner. She was the plant. She had been dating Alessandro for 6 months, likely feeding Vestra every detail of the car's development, distracting him, isolating him from his mother. And she had come back tonight to make sure he got in that car on Saturday. Sarai grabbed her phone to call Alessandro, but then she hesitated. He was with her. If Sarai called, Tiffany might answer. Or worse, Tiffany might see the notification and know Sarai was on to her. She needed physical proof. She needed to get to the track. The sun began to rise over the city, casting a blood-red light onto the buildings. Saturday was 24 hours away, but Sarai knew she didn't have 24 hours, because at that moment she heard the front door of the suite open and close. She ran to the window. Down on the street, Alessandro was getting into a car. Not his usual driver, a Vestra company car. And he was alone. Sarai's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. We know you speak German. Keep your mouth shut, and your father keeps his medical care. One word to Alessandro, and the checks stop." Sarai stared at the screen. They knew everything. They were threatening her father to keep her silent while they led Alessandro to the slaughter. She looked at her father's pill bottle on the nightstand. Then she looked at the empty street where Alessandro had just disappeared. "Sorry, Dad," she whispered. "I have to be reckless." She grabbed her coat, ditched her phone on the bed so they couldn't track her, and ran out the door. She wasn't going to the track. She was going to the one place Vestra wouldn't expect her to go. She was going to break into the Romano Motors garage in Brooklyn, where the prototype was being stored. The Brooklyn Navy Yard was a ghost town of industrial grey. Sarai found the faulty side door of Hangar 5 that Isabella had mentioned and slipped inside. The roar of an engine vibrated in her teeth. Below, on the massive indoor track, the Romano Futura sat ready. Alessandro was pulling on his helmet. In the pit lane, Tiffany stood with Victor Krell and his associate Braun, holding a stopwatch. Sarai realized with horror they had moved the test up to ensure there were no witnesses. She bolted for the control booth overlooking the track. Inside, a Vestra technician jumped up, reaching for a radio. Sarai didn't hesitate. She grabbed a heavy fire extinguisher and smashed it against the metal doorframe with a deafening clang. "Get back!" she screamed. The technician scrambled away. On the track, the car peeled out. 20 mortis to 60, 80. Sarai jammed the headset over her ears. "Alessandro, stop!" Static crackled. "Who is this?" Alessandro's voice was annoyed. "Tiffany said you left. It's Sarai. Listen to me. They moved the kill switch. It's not 120 kilometers. If you hit 100 miles per hour, the steering locks. Tiffany is Braun's sister. She's working for Krell." The car hit 95 meters per hour. The wall loomed closer. Security guards burst into the booth, grabbing Sarai. Desperate, she screamed into the mic. "I love you. Not the billionaire, you, the man who loves his mother. Please don't die." At exactly 99.90 yards, Sam, brake lights flared red. The car spun violently, tires screaming, sliding sideways across the asphalt in a cloud of smoke. It stopped inches from the concrete barrier. Alessandro climbed out, ripping off his helmet. He didn't look at the car. He looked at the booth, then at the pit lane. He marched over, slamming Krell against the wall. Tiffany reached out, crying fake tears, but Alessandro just pointed to the exit as police sirens wailed in the distance. 2 days later, Sarai packed her bag at the plaza. The scandal was global news. Vestra CEO arrested, socialite exposed as spy. But Sarai felt only exhaustion. Her job was done. Alessandro walked in. He looked different, lighter. "I checked the files. You were right about everything." "I'm glad you're safe," Sarai said, zipping her suitcase. "I have to get back to my dad." "Your father has been moved," Alessandro interrupted gently. "I had him transferred to the Presbyterian Specialist Unit. I've set up a trust. He will never worry about money again." Sarai froze, tears filling her eyes. "You didn't have to do that." "You saved my life," Alessandro said, stepping closer. "And in the car, you said something else." Sarai looked down. "I was desperate. I wanted to shock you." "You said you loved the man, not the money," Alessandro whispered, lifting her chin. "Did you mean it?" "I don't lie, Alessandro." "Then don't leave," he said. "Come to Italy. Not as an employee, as the woman who taught me to listen." He kissed her, and for the first time, Sarai didn't feel invisible. She felt like the only person in the world. 6 months later, the terrace of Villa Romano overlooked the rolling hills of Tuscany. Sarai sat at the table, finishing her master's thesis. Across the garden, Isabella was laughing, healthier than she had been in years. Alessandro pulled up in a vintage Alfa Romeo, carrying a basket of olives. He wrapped his arms around Sarai, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Ready for dinner?" he asked. "My favorite restaurant. The owner's mother cooks, and she doesn't speak a word of English." "Sounds perfect," Sarai smiled. The waitress from the Golden Heron was gone. In her place was a woman who had found her voice, her heart, and her home. Sarai Bennett's journey from an overlooked waitress to the savior of the Romano Empire proves that true power isn't about wealth. It's about integrity and the courage to speak up. Alessandro learned that the most valuable things in life can't be bought. And Tiffany learned that lies always crumble in the end. This story reminds us that we never know who is listening or whose heart we might touch with a simple act of kindness. If you enjoyed this dramatic story of love and justice, please give this video a like. It really helps the channel. Share this with a friend who loves a good romance, and hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss our next real-life story. What would you have done in Sarai's shoes? Let us know in the comments below.